Hey everyone, welcome to another very exciting tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you each and every step to how I created this beautiful sunset scene. So as you can see, the original shot has no sun, looks quite dull and boring, and the finished result is, dare I say, beautiful. Anyway, so what we're going to do is go through the exact steps on how I did this, but what I really want you guys to get out of this is not just learning techniques, but I also want you to get out there and start thinking creatively before you press that record button. I mean, we're equipped with tools that are so powerful these days that we do have a lot of control in post. So it's a really valuable asset to, one, basically learn the skills of post, but two, really put them into play before you actually get there. So that's something I'm trying to push a lot these days. So here we are in Red Cine X, and the raw file that I shot with my Red camera is here, and you can see it's 4K. And you can also see that it's very flat. So what we could do just quickly is, we could up the saturation here, and we could play with our contrast curve, give this thing a black point, and we could get some looking pretty nice indeed. And push our mids over into that sort of purple realm, and maybe what about push our reds up in the mids there as well. And add a bit of magenta there. Okay, so we're starting to, get close to more sunset vibe, and if we compare that to how it was shot, it looks a hell of a lot better, right? But I felt like it needed more. It needed a sun to actually sell that sunset look and really make it feel, whatever that means. So, the first step is getting this clip out of Red Cine X, and we're going to render it into a format that's a little bit more user-friendly than an R3D. And what we're going to choose is a Canopus HQX file wrapped in a QuickTime wrapper. So easy way to do that is just go File, Export. Red Cine X is free, by the way. And what we can do is we're going to export the clip in the viewer, and we're going to choose the format is QuickTime. Now if we set up that QuickTime, we go to Video, and I can choose the compression type. You'll also notice there's another really cool free codec called AvidDNX HD. Super handy, especially if you're grading in DaVinci and you don't want to use native R3D files. But today we're going to use Canopus HQX because we want to keep the 10-bit beauty. And millions of colors plus, make sure the frames per second match, and press OK. Press OK, make sure you tell it where to go, press OK. This is basic computer stuff, right? So we press export, and then we're going to have a beautiful 10-bit file to play with. So let's run along and have a look in EDIUS. Okay, here we are in EDIUS. First thing we need to do is import our footage. So over in your bin, you can create a bin however you like. And once you have created folders, you can import footage just by double-clicking or right-clicking over here and go Add File. So point to the location where you rendered your shot from Red Cine X and bring that in. And if we just drag that straight down to the timeline, we can start playing around. Now, the first thing you'll notice is there's some black bars at the top and bottom of our frame. Now, that's just because the aspect ratio of the 4K footage just is a little bit wider than 16:9. So what I'm going to do is click on my clip, go to the information palette, and double-click on the layout tool. Now, in the layout tool, we can, rotate, shrink, expand, keyframe, do whatever we want to our footage, and basically change the layout of our footage. So what I'm going to just do now is quickly go to the preset and choose default. And here we are back to start again. But what we will do is just expand our footage just by clicking on these boxes on the corners and just expanding it up a little bit to get rid of those black bars there. Beautiful. Alright. So now it's looking a lot better. We have a full 16:9 frame. Now the next thing we're going to do is just add some more video tracks because we're going to need a few. Now a really quick way to do that is just right click and just go duplicate, and that's just going to add one above it. And we just need about 5 of them, I think, today. So here are our 5 video tracks. Another thing I like to do when creating an effects scene or a composited scene, especially when there's a few layers involved, it's nice to stay organized. So what I'm going to do is right click on the bottom track here, and I'm just going to call that background. And on the second one, we're going to right click on that, rename, and we're going to call this sun key. And the third one, we'll right click, rename, and call this sun. and this will all make sense in a second, don't worry about it. The track number 4, we're going to call this clouds, and let's just leave track 5 as is for now. So the first thing we need to do is not color correct the scene. That's the last step. The first thing we want to do is add a sun behind here. So how are we going to do that? Now there's a number of ways we could do it. There's probably actually about 10 different ways we could do it. But I'm going to show you a way that works really quick and easy for me. And, you know, one thing is to create a circle. We could do that with a mask tool or, you know, with any sort of shape tool. But we basically need to create a sun. Now, in my last tutorial, 10 seconds of moonshine, I supplied you guys with this moonshot that I took. And it's just a still image of the moon. And what we're going to do is actually turn that moon into a sun. So I'm going to drop that down here. And once it's on my timeline, you'll see I need to extend it out so it fills the duration of my video. And the next thing I'm going to do is duplicate that. A really quick way to duplicate that onto the next track above it is just click, press Control, drag it to the next track, and then let go. So now we have 2 identical moonshots there. Now the top moonshot, what I'm going to do is click on it, go to the information palette, go to layout tool once again. Now this allows us to move our sun, aka moon, around. And what I might do is just enlarge it a little bit. And, you know, maybe just a little bit more. And for there, I think there's going to look pretty good for now. Let's just press OK. Now, we're going to copy the layout properties of that moon to the sun key track underneath it. Quickest and easiest way to do that is, beauty of EDIUS is actually we can duplicate layout properties just by dragging from one to the other. So here are our 2 clips. I'm going to click on the top one, the one we just modified the layout properties for, and then I'm going to drag that layout and drop it on the second one. So now they both have identical layout properties. Pretty cool. Now, how do we get rid of this black background? Well, we've got a really useful tool in here under Effects, and if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of Video Effects, you'll see a little folder called Keys. Now within Keys, there's this really cool effect called a track matte. Now I'm not going to go into too much detail about what a track matte is or how it works. You can check out my other tutorials on transparency to learn more about that. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to drag my track matte onto the top clip in the transparency section of that top clip. And straight away you can see things starting to work. But we still need a little bit more refinement. For one, I don't like the place of the sun. And 2, you can also see that it's a little bit transparent. So what we need to do is use this sun key track to help create a cleaner key, one that doesn't have transparency here. And a quick way to do that is go to Effect, wavy curve, and we're going to drop that on the sun key track. And if we double click the wavy curve, we just grab our white point here. Once again, if I'm flying through this too fast, each individual effect I've covered in great detail in my previous tutorials, so make sure you check them out, www.mattscottvisuals.com. Now I'm just going to grab that white point and just drag it across here, and you can see straight away that transparency has disappeared in the moon. But we have introduced another problem now. You can see that black background is not being keyed out anymore because we've raised the luma values of that. So all we need to do is go to our black point down here and just drag that to the right until it disappears. Beautiful. So now we have a really clean, really quick, easy key of our moon, which we're going to turn into a sun. So great. Next step is, I just want to refine the position of that. Now that we have that background removed, it'll be much easier to see. So first thing I'm going to do is click on the sun clip and then double click the layout tool, and then I'm just going to move it down here. Now you can see I'm sort of not really seeing it, but don't worry guys, it'll all make sense in a second. I'm also just going to make it a little bit bigger as well. So I'm going to try about there and press OK, and then just like before I'm just going to copy those layout properties to the second one, and now our hole has followed it. So beautiful. There's our sun. I like it. I like it because look at that. This guy's just about touching it with his head. I like that. Yeah. Anyway, so next thing we want to do is make the sun, or make the moon rather, look more like the sun. So how do we do that? Well, if we look at the previous example, the finished one that I've created, this one, sorry, you'll notice that the sun, or the moon, actually has no more detail left in it at all. It's basically just a big orange glowing ball. So what we have to do is a number of things, But first of all, what I'm going to do is add an effect to that top layer. Now, just reiterate that this sun key track is literally just creating an alpha channel for us. So if we ever want to modify what the sun looks like, it's this sun clip above here. So what I'm going to do once again, exactly the same as what we did before, go to Effects, YUV curve, drop that on the sun track, and then double click on the YUV curve properties in the information palette. And once again, we're going to play with this YUV curve. And as you can see, as I move it around, we're changing the look of this sun. So all I'm going to do is just grab that white point and really crush all that detail out of there. Because I basically just want it to be a white circle, right? So that's looking pretty good straight away. So we're one step closer, but how the hell do we get that sun behind the clouds? Well, it's actually a lot easier than you think. Now, this is another transparency tutorial. Now, this technique will be using transparency once again. And I actually haven't covered this in any of my tutorials, even though I've covered the same principles. So I will go a little bit slower here. But what we're going to do now is we're going to grab this walking pier background shot, and I'm going to duplicate that. So what's the quickest way to duplicate a clip? Click on it, press Control, drag to the track you want, and then let go. Now we have a duplicate track. And you'll notice, because we can't see through this, we actually can't see any of this information below. But the idea here is that we just want this top track to only show us the clouds. So how do we do that? Well, what we want to do is create transparency. We want to put a hole in this top track. So basically, where would we want that hole to be? Well, we want our sun to be behind the clouds. So if this sky portion, without the clouds, was transparent with a hole, then we would see the video tracks beneath it, right? So how do we achieve that? Well, to control luminance transparency, we use what's called a luma key. So if we go to Effects, go all the way down to the bottom, and we choose luma key. Now we drop the luma key, make sure that you drop it on the transparency portion of the video track. So I'm going to do that right now, just drop luma key on there. And nothing seems to happen. Okay, so we need to modify the properties of that luminance key. So let's double click on that and have a look. So in the luminance key, there is a lot of information here, keyframe settings, etc. Stuff that we don't really need to go over in great detail. Not today anyway. So what I want to teach you quickly is what this graph means and how we can create a selection. Now the selection is what is going to become transparent. So let's break it down for a second. Let's have a look at this shot. What are we trying to achieve? We're trying to create transparency within a range of luminance. Okay, that's pretty easy to do when you know what you're doing, right? So let's have a look at the values that are plotted along this histogram. You'll notice that there's pure black here to the left, and then that graduates all the way to pure white. Now, what is the histogram showing us? It's showing us that there's actually no information past middle grey, or just above middle grey. So there's actually no pure white in this image, which is fine. But there is quite a bit of information here, and if you look at this, even though this is coloured, this coloured part of the sky is very in line with this coloured part of grey. Now that's really interesting. Why? Because if we move these little handles around and we move it closer and closer and closer to that portion, check it out. We've created transparency with that part of the sky. Now these video tracks underneath this top cloud track are shining through that hole. How awesome is that? But we need to refine it a little bit, and the way to do that is, the first step basically is what I just showed you. So find the portion that you want to create transparency with. Now the next part is, if you move these little handles around, you'll notice there's these softened edged handles. And what that allows us to do is create a much softer edge. Because let me just close those back up and press OK. And let's just double click so we can see what we're doing here. You can see it's a very ugly key. It hasn't really keyed very nicely. And that's because we have a very hard edge on our selection of luminance. What we want to do is soften the edges of that. So if we double click on luminance once again, and we go to our little selection, all we need to do now is soften this selection towards darker shades of grey. And as you can see, what's happening now, as I go all the way down to here, I'm starting to introduce darker shades of grey. But I'm doing it in a very soft and gentle way. And this is just perfect. But if we go a little too far, you can see we're going to start keying out this much of the darkness. So that's not actually what we want. We want to bring that back to a nice point around there. Let's press OK and just double click, have a look at that close up. That's looking pretty damn good. It's looking pretty damn good. So we're starting to get our effect the way we want it, but we still need to color grade the hell out of it. Okay, so remember we rendered that clip out at 10-bit. That means that our color precision is much higher. Now the beauty of EDIUS is, not only is it real time, but it enables us to work in a 10-bit color space, having much more precision and control over color. But it's important to note that you can change your project settings at any time, and you may well not be working in 10-bit color space, so make sure you check that. You want your quantization bitrate to be 10-bit, and if it's not, just click Change Current Setting, and you can change it here from 8-bit to 10-bit. So that's really important. Alright, so we're almost ready to start making this look like a real sunset scene, but what we want to do is nest this sequence into another sequence, which is going to help us, it's just going to keep things neater and make things a little bit more easy when we come back to this project in the future, or basically we're just going to clean this thing up a little bit. But before we do that, I just want to point out a little mismatch in the sequence name. Now you'll notice this sequence here, sequence 4, is actually the only sequence in my project, which is also called sequence 1. Now it's called sequence 1 in the bin, but it's called sequence 4 down here in our timeline. Now there's a really good reason for that, and I'm not going to get into it right now, but basically the short story is EDIUS allows you to have subclip sequences from a sequence, so you can create a subclip as a sequence from another sequence. It's a little bit confusing right now, but let's just not get into it. Let's look at how we can solve this problem. So one way we can do it is right click and go rename clip. But does this really solve our problem? Let's have a look and find out. Now, whenever I'm creating a new sequence name, I like to use spiky brackets because it just separates my sequences from every other clip instantly. Doesn't matter what view I'm in. As soon as I see a spiky bracket, I know it's a sequence. Anyway, so I'm going to call this sunset comp. And spiky bracket close. Now, hold on a second. It's still called sequence 4 down here. What the hell? Now, the reason that happened is because we just renamed the clip in the bin. We didn't actually rename the sequence itself. So there's two ways to do that. One of them, we can right-click, and instead of going to rename clip, we can go to sequence settings, and we can change it here. So we can go sunset comp. And now you'll see it's changed down the bottom and change up the top, and they'll match. But another real quick way to do that is just double right click on this little tag, and then we can change it to whatever we want. So I just got to call it sunset comp again with 2 spiky brackets this time. And you'll notice that changed in both places. That's really cool. So what we're going to do now is create a new sequence. So we go right click in the bin, new sequence, and I'm going to double click and open that sequence. What I'm also going to do is just get rid of these audio tracks, just to make things a little bit neater. And I'm going to double right click on sequence 1, and I'm going to call this colored comp. Now, the way to nest a sequence into another sequence sounds a bit confusing maybe, but it's actually really helpful, is we just go to our bin, here's our sunset comp, and just treat it like it's a video clip, right? Just pretend this has been rendered and it is a video clip, even though it's a bunch of layers. We can drag that down into our colored comp. And I'm just going to press Alt-G so I unlink audio. We don't actually need an audio track for this one. And press delete. So now we have our sunset comp nested within a comp called colored comp. And let's go ahead and get started. So straight up, let's jump into our effects tab. And we're going to go straight down to the mask. The mask is such a powerful color correction tool, especially in EDIUS, because it allows us to nest multiple filters within filters within filters within a mask. I know I'm going ahead of myself here, but trust me, this thing is totally awesome. So, and the reason I want to use a mask is because I want to separate certain areas, color certain areas. I mean, if we go back to my bin and have a look at the finished result, you can see that there's quite a lot of orange and warmth here around the sun, but then it sort of backs off, saturation drops, and it's sort of a bit more blue and cool down towards the water and the edges. This is a really important way to sell the effect, and it's just a nice way to color a scene. Having that control with masks is super powerful. So let's go back to our colored comp, and let's double click the mask. Now the first thing we're going to work on is getting this sun to look a little more hot. So one way to do that is just grab this circle mask tool, and we're just going to draw a mask around our sun. And if we untick this little scale button here, this figure 8 fixed ratio, now we can stretch it wide. Next thing we're going to do is go soften, and we're going to soften it by about 800 pixels. And we want to soften it both on the inside and the outside. On the inside of this mask, I'm going to place a couple of filters. A way to do that is if we open the Select Filter button, and let's just move this over here so we can see what we're doing. We go to Video, and let's go down to Combine Filters. Click Combine Filters. Now we can open the properties of that filter. Now within Combine Filters, I'm going to add a couple of filters. I want to add one, a wavy curve, so we can control the brightness. Two, I'm going to add a three-way color corrector, just so we can control the color. And that should do us for now. So let's press OK. Okay, so firstly we're going to add some color. Let's go to the setup of the three-way color corrector. Now I'm just going to jump straight for my midtones, and I'm going to up the saturation straight away. So let's just do that and see what happens. Okay, so we're already getting quite a lot more warmth here around the sun, which is looking quite nice, but we can even push more warmth into that. So just grab that three-way little button and push it up here. Now it's starting to look pretty good. Now remember, I want more of a yellow around the sun, and I want more of a cool sort of blue look on the outside of this mask. So we're going to place filters on the outside of the mask in a second. But the other thing I noticed too is, have you ever seen the sun to look that pure white, especially at a sunset? I haven't. So one thing we can do is go to our white portion of the three-way color corrector and just push that into orange as well. Now we can also go to the saturation of that and increase that. And now you can start seeing that the sun is looking a lot more like a sun. It still needs quite a bit of work, but that's looking pretty good. Alright, so let's press OK. So next we'll play the wavy curve. Let's set that up. So if we push this around, obviously we're going to change the brightness within inside of that mask. And basically what I want to do is just add a tiny bit of contrast and just brighten that sun up just a little bit more. Now remember, you can always split the screen and have a look at where you've come. Okay, it's looking pretty good. I just drop those mids a little bit more. Really want that sun to be hot. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's press OK. Now let's add an effect on the outside of this mask. So let's enable the filter on the outside. Go to the setup, and just like we did before, let's go to Video Filters, Combine Filters, and let's add a couple of filters here. One of them we're going to do wavy, another one three-way, and we're also going to do smooth blow. Now first up, what we'll do is play with a wavy curve, because I want to drop the brightness around the sun. Remember the mask, everything outside of that mask, we have control over that now. So now we're really starting to manipulate this scene and bring it to life. So there's our wavy curve done. Now remember too that we have these color channels as well. So if we push our U channel up to the left, we have blue. Down to the right, we have yellow. If we push our V channel up to the left, we have red or magenta. And down to the right, we have green. Now these curves aren't as intuitive as a three-way color corrector, but they can be really powerful if you know what you're doing. If we create an S curve, we can actually increase saturation. Now I'm not saying you have to do it this way, but playing with curves can be real powerful. It's looking pretty good. Let's just have a look at the before and after. So let's have a look at what that did just to the outside of our mask. Looking pretty cool already, right? Okay, so let's press OK to that. And press OK to that. And have a look. So with one mask, we've gone from that to that. It's starting to look a lot better, but still not convincing enough. So if we go to our Information tab, I'm going to duplicate that mask simply by dragging the same mask preset we just created back on top of our clip. And look how crazy that looks. It's a little bit overdone, isn't it? It's a hell of a lot overdone. But the point is, we've doubled up every single effect. They're being multiplied together to give us this crazy, crazy hot look. But the beauty is we can go back into our mask filter of the second one, and we can change the shape of this to sort of narrow in and be closer to our sun. It's looking pretty cool already. The other thing is, we can just go to the strength value and just lower the strength. So we don't even have to go into the properties of each filter. Even though we can and will. The point is, this is a beautiful way. It's almost like an opacity slider for the group of effects that you've placed in and around the mask. So let's go to the inside filter and muck around with those settings a little bit. We'll go untick our three-way and just see what that's actually doing. So it's a little bit too much saturation there for my liking. I'm going to drop that back some, especially that white point. Just going to default that. So that's looking pretty good. And I'm going to press OK. Alright, we're nearly there. So, the one thing that stands out to me now is that the sun, it's just not hot enough. It's not piercing enough. It doesn't look real. So, there's a few ways we could do it, and you know, I've experimented with a wavy curve and a mask over there just to brighten it up. But one way that I've found that really helps things glow, I mean, have you ever composited a muzzle flash into a scene or anything like that? Whenever you try and composite flames or fire, often some of the best ways to do that is to use blending modes. So I'm going to use that same sort of theory and try and get this sun to burn. So what we're going to do is duplicate our comp. So click, control, drag, let go. Now we have two copies. So if we go to our effects tab and we go down to keys and then open the blend folder, and let's add addition onto the transparency portion of our top track. Now, look what happens straight away. Everything starts to glow and it just looks crazy hectic, right? So, first thing we want to do is just delete all of our filters. And still, it looks crazy hectic. Everything's burning, but the cool part is, look at that sun now. It's really starting to burn, and that's what we want. So let's focus our attention to that portion of our image with a mask. So let's go Effects, and Mask, drop that on top of there. And let's just draw a circle here around our sun. And what we need to do now is we can drop the opacity of everything outside of this mask to 0. Let's see what happens when we do that. Now we're only burning this part of the sun. Pretty cool, huh? What if we soften the edge of that mask by, say, 500 pixels? It's starting to look real cool. But we need to do a few more adjustments. So let's go to the inside filter. And let's go color correction, wavy curve, and open the effects for that. And we can just drop it down a little bit and raise the highlights to burn out that sun even more. And what we could do now is, if we shift these color channels around, we can add extra colors in here. So we can sort of, if we just grab the bottom left hand corner of U and just drag it down a little bit, we're going to add a bit more warmth to that sun, make it more sort of orange and more fiery, right? So now we're starting to look a lot better. Let's press OK, and press OK again. So yes, we're starting to look a lot better. The sun is starting to look a lot like it's on fire. But one thing I noticed is, I don't like the very harsh edge of that sun. One way we can fix that is just go Effect, and we can add a smooth blur to that top layer, and we can, you know, adjust the radius to about 12. Now that's looking a lot better. It's sort of blending and burning, a bit more hazy. And we're starting to get a much cooler look. So the last thing I'm going to do is just add one final color correction, and it's just with a wavy curve. And I'm going to add it to the bottom track, not to the burning sun layer. And I'm just going to darken the whole scene a little bit. I'm also going to just play around with my color channels here. This can really affect the mood. Now we're starting to look pretty awesome. Like a real beautiful, inviting sunset, right? Let's press OK. And here we have a composited scene. And yes, we did it in a lot of steps, but I mean, once you sort of understand what's happening, I could literally recreate this scene in about 10 minutes. And I urge you to practice and do the same. Let's have a look at what we started with here. So if we go to our bin and we grab our original clip, drop that on top. Heck yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that. I know it was a long and convoluted process, but trust me, it's really worth learning this stuff, and it's actually really fun. Thanks again, my name's Matt Scott, and I've got another tutorial coming up on a day-to-night scene, so stay tuned for that.